Please take a second to subscribe, then like and share afterwards. We can really use your support. Thank you. The debt incurred by the Ottoman Empire could be used to bring about the return of the Jewish people to the land. The man with the measuring line, Charles Warren, returned to England after his work surveying in Israel. Soon after, he began receiving apparitions or visions concerning the land of Israel and its future. Not just a vision, but a plan on how that would come to fruition. The vision was written in a record he named Land of Promise. Keeping in mind the state of the land when he worked there was desolate and barren. This is what makes this vision more prophetic and stunning. He envisioned the Ottoman debt would be used to bring the Jewish people back, and that they would again learn to farm the land, that they'd learn to irrigate the land and bring back the ecosystem that it used to be. The deserts, he wrote, would be made to blossom once again. He envisioned a nation resurrected from the dead and great powers in Europe involved in its resurrection. All in all, he envisioned a nation attaining a standard of living equal to that of most advanced nations. The land known to the world as Palestine could again become a land flowing with milk and honey. And so that you may live long in the land the Lord swore to your ancestors to give to them and their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. Deuteronomy 11:9. It was amazingly prophetic, and in the years and decades to follow, it would all come to pass. Soon, the Jewish population would turn from a minority to a majority in the years following 1867. In 1870, the Mikveh Yisrael was founded. It was the first school established to teach Jewish people how to farm the land. It was the first time in 2,000 years that they were being taught how to sow and reap in the Promised Land. The first sign that the country was soon going to transform. Agricultural settlements were also beginning to pop up. Yet no one involved in the land's restoration could have planned for it or known it was coming. The prophecies are beyond any plan or effort of man. All history moves to bring them to fruition. Every event, every life, and every path, all woven together. It also was for the stranger. Twain had a close friend in Europe. His name was Theodor Herzl, the man who would later become the founder of political Zionism. Zion is the ancient name for Jerusalem and its land, and Zionism was the movement for the return of the Jewish people to the land and restoration of the nation. Herzl would be called the father of the Jewish state. So, of all the people on earth, the paths of the two people so joined to the mystery would intersect. Recall what was written in the book of Deuteronomy. The prophecy of the stranger leads into the prophecy of the nation's regathering. Just as the two prophecies were joined together, so too were the two lives that manifest them. Herzl himself would identify the time and place of the manifestation for his role. It happened in the city of Paris in 1894. It is here that his transformation into the visionary and father of the Jewish state began, and the paths of Twain and Herzl would converge there in Paris. It is a fulfillment of the convergence of the prophecy. Prior to the next Jubilee to take place that follows 1867, the Jewish people would have to begin returning to the land between the two Jubilees. That trickle indeed began, and the land started coming back to life. That trickle soon became a stream, and then a river. They planted fields, vineyards, and forests, and built roads, houses, and towns, a culture of their own, the beginning of a nation. What was sown in 1867 soon would come to fruition and increase. Even world leaders would begin to take notice. The only thing yet to happen was the official decree to occur, an official founding for the nation. Jews were buying property, but the land was still under Ottoman rule. Before the next Jubilee to arrive in 1917, something big was to take place to set the stage for the transference of land. It was the First World War, taking place at just the right appointed time 3 years before the Jubilee. After a series of events beginning in June 1914, countries began taking sides. While Britain declared war on Germany by August, the Ottoman Empire was not openly allied with any of the European powers. However, it did sign a secret treaty with Germany. Under orders by a German admiral, the Ottoman Navy launched an attack on Russian ports in the Black Sea. Within months, the Ottomans found themselves embroiled in war against Russia, France, and Britain. The pieces of the puzzle were now coming together. One British politician and member of Parliament was in just at the right place and the right time. He was Arthur Balfour, a man of deep Christian faith who dreamed for a rebirth of the Jewish nation in Israel. His time to fulfill prophecy came when David Lloyd George succeeded to become the new British Prime Minister in 1916. George appointed Balfour his Foreign Secretary. Suddenly, Balfour found himself in the heights of world power at that critical moment. As the year of Jubilee began in 1917, members of the British government held a conference concerning Palestine. By mid-year, the Ottomans were facing a bleak end, and Balfour called for a draft to be made for a public declaration concerning the land. By autumn, the British cabinet was in discussion over the form the declaration would take, but it needed the support of the American president. By October 16, 1917, Woodrow Wilson sent his support for it. On the 31st of October, two events coincided that would seal the return. The declaration was approved by the British War Cabinet, and the very first place was regained in the Holy Land during the war. It was Beersheba, found in the southern region of the Negev. Beersheba was intrinsic to the beginning of Israel's restoration, and in ancient times, intrinsic to the beginning of the nation of Israel. When the Bible speaks of Israel's borders, it uses the phrase, "from Dan to Beersheba." Beersheba was Israel's southernmost border. It was central to its very beginning, and it all starts with how their right to the land began. As with Israel's return to the ancestral possession, the right to the land must be invoked. Their modern right to the land is based on their ancestors' right. Who is the ancestor? The father of the Jewish people, Abraham. It was at that moment in Genesis 12 where God himself calls Abraham to leave the nations and to come to the land that God would show him. It is there that Abraham receives the promise and enters the land. God would give the land to Abraham and his descendants. You cannot find a stronger title or deed to a land than that. Now, let's recall, a parasha is an appointed scripture in past times to be read on specific days on the Sabbath. Please note, all scriptures are appointed long before anyone involved with those events was born. On that last Sabbath, before the declaration that would usher in the return of the land to Abraham's children, there was a scripture appointed to be read, and it just so happened to be in Genesis 12. For in the year of Jubilee, the right of the original owner must be invoked and affirmed. The appointed scripture reads, "Now the Lord had said to Abraham, 'Get out of your country, from your family and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. Genesis 12:1. And the very first mention of the children of Israel. I will make you a great nation. And the words by which God gave the land to the children of Israel. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, To your descendants I will give this land. In that same word, appointed for the week in which the Balfour Declaration would give the land back to the Jewish people, the ancestral right was proclaimed again and again. For all the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. I am the Lord, who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans, to give you this land to inherit it. On the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, To your descendants I have given this land. Also, give to you and your descendants after you the land as an everlasting possession. Let's repeat that, an everlasting possession. And finally, they shall return here. Getting back to Beersheba, Abraham was instrumental to its founding. It still exists today, and Abraham was responsible for its name. Abraham dug a well there, and later in Genesis 21 it states that the men of the Philistine king Abimelech took possession of Abraham's well. Abraham then approached the king to contend that it would be returned. Abimelech does return it, so a covenant was made between them about the land, and the place was called the Well of the Oath. In Hebrew, the word for well is beer, and the word for oath is shiva. Together it becomes Beersheba or Beersheba. The Jubilee of 1917 mirrors the story in Genesis 21. Abraham lost his possession. Abraham lost his property for a time, then has it returned to him from the hands of the Philistines. So too, the nation of Israel will have their land returned to them from the hands of the Palestinians. Recall in Part 2, the name Palestine derives from the Latin name for Philistine. Beersheba is also the first name in the Promised Land to which Abraham laid claim. The first possession, the first loss, the first appeal for return, and the first restoration. After the giving of God's promise, it was the well, the covenant, and the name Beersheba itself that constituted Israel's first legal right and title in the Promised Land. And this city became the first to be recovered from the Ottomans in the Jubilee of 1917 on the very same day that the declaration was approved by the War Cabinet. On that very Sabbath of the week of the return and declaration, there was a pre-appointed scripture to be read. And for the record, these appointed scriptures are determined long in advance before that Sabbath, as they are read in a yearly cycle. You may be shocked when it turned out to be. Therefore, he called that place Beersheba, because the two of them swore an oath there. Therefore, prophecy declares that the relinquishing begins with Abraham's city of Beersheba and lead to the ultimate relinquishing of the ultimate possession, Jerusalem, and the entire land. With only 22 days remaining in the Jubilee, the liberation of Jerusalem took place. The city would be given to the empire that had just issued the declaration on November 2nd, the decree that went public and would forever be known as the Balfour Declaration. The decree stated, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. The declaration marked the fulfillment of the Jubilee and the official release of the land from the Ottomans back to the original owner, mediated and authorized by Great Britain, the world's preeminent empire of the time. It was the first such declaration of any major power since ancient times, the first since the Roman Empire drove the Jewish people out of their land nearly 2,000 years earlier. In 1867, the release of the land began. In 1917, the release came to its fulfillment. In the first Jubilee, the land was measured. In the second, it was transferred. But the declaration or decree was only the beginning. Each Jubilee sets in motion a new cycle. It opens up a new era. It unleashes the appointed purposes. With the Balfour Declaration issued, it gave the Jewish people a tangible hope of a homeland. And with that hope, they came from the ends of the earth back to their ancestral homeland in droves, as it was decreed in the ancient ordinance. Each shall return to his own possession. Up next, in part 4 of the Return of Israel, we shift to the events of the following Jubilee with the establishment of the modern nation of Israel. Here on Prophecies Uncovered.